Hello makers, and welcome to the 12th day of the 12 DIYs of Christmas with Stitchery. I'm Catherine Harris. Now, if you've been following along on my channel, you'll remember back in October, we made some cute little pumpkins out of a thrifted sweater, which is this one here, and it only used one of these sleeves. So I thought we would do another thrifted project with this sweater here. So let's get started. So to start, find a pattern of your choice and then lay it on some broadcloth. I'm actually using a upcycled sheet that I found at the thrift store, and you want 2 layers of that. And then on one of the pieces, you're going to mark your notches that you're going to leave open and give those a nice good press. Next, onto the sweater. So I am going to use the bottom portion of the sweater because I like the bottom portion to be the top cuff of my stocking here. So I'm just pinning that in place, being very careful to match up the bottom edges on the other side. And now I'm going to cut those with some shears as opposed to the rotary cutter, just because it is a bit of a bulky fabric here. So you want to go all the way around the pattern that you have and cut out that stocking. And now we've got our 2 layers here. And next, I'm just trying to figure out what I want to use for the tab that's going to hold up the stocking. And I like these little side pieces that are on this sweater, and I think it's the perfect size for it. So I'm just cutting out a thin rectangle on that, and I'm going to sew it in half here. So next, after I've squared that up, I'm going to take some clips and just clip them together before I sew them. Now, because it is a stretchy fabric, we're going to switch this to a zigzag stitch, and I've added the back stitch on here. And so I'm going to stitch down one side, and then I'm going to stitch down the folded side as well, because when you do stitch on the knit fabrics, it does change the properties of it, and I want to ensure that it lays nice and flat. So I took that to the iron and I just pressed it in half. And now we're going to add it to our stocking. And so find the top corner of your stocking and just place it on there, right sides together. And I just secured mine with a pin. Make sure you push it out from the edge so it's not sitting in your seam allowance on the edge of the stocking, because then that'll get caught in a later step. So just tack that on nice and securely, and you can switch back to your straight stitch for the rest of the stitching here. Next, you are going to take your lining pieces and put them on top of each of your outer fashion fabric or sweater fabric. And then I'm just pinning this in place. It's most important to pin the one with the tab because you want to make sure that that tab lies flat. And then backstitch at the front and back and sew across the top of each of these seams. And then take it to our ironing board, and we are going to get that pressed so it lays nice and flat. Next, you're going to put right sides together with the fashion fabric facing each other and the 2 lining pieces facing each other. Begin by matching up on the top of the stocking, and I'm just pinning diagonally here to get the tab out of the way so that it isn't in the seam here. And then pin all around the lining, and then we're going to start at the notch, go all the way around our stocking, and then end here so we have an opening and able to flip it. So I'm just taking it to the machine, and I'm using a straight stitch going across here. And what you can do is you can also take it to your serger and serge all of those seams as well. It'll help it to be a little bit more secure. And then I'm just notching out the curves here. And you don't need to notch out on the sweater fabric because it does have some stretch and give, so it won't pucker. Then we're going to pop it right side out. And that looks pretty good, and all the seams seem to match up. Then we're going to take it to our iron, and we're just going to press this out quite nicely, focusing more on our cotton broadcloth lining and really making sure that the hole that we have is pressed nicely. So you could do a ladder stitch if you really wanted to conceal it. Because it's going to be inside the stocking, I've decided to just stitch it on top. It's nice and quick, back stitching both at the front and back. And next, you use a little bit of water to get out your water-soluble marker, and I'm just pressing that just to dry it up. Now we get to put our lining inside our stocking. So you just push that in and get to all the nooks and crannies and pull out all the seams. And then I gave it a good press before I popped it over to the machine. And now we're just going to stitch along the top band just to secure that lining in place so it doesn't pop out if you ever need to wash it. And I secured this with pins along the way, and I'm just backstitching both at the start and the end. And there's our stocking, but I think it could use a little extra something. So I've decided to get out my water-soluble marker, and I am going to embroider Millie's name on the top of it. So I started off using a double floss, embroidery floss, and stitched up Millie's name here in some black embroidery floss. And I finished it up, and then I decided I didn't quite like the look of it. It was a little too harsh with the contrasting, and it was a bit too thin. I wanted something a bit chunkier. This is a knit sweater after all. So I decided to pull all those stitches out and go with some chunky wool. And so I'm just using a tapestry needle in order to thread this, which is a bit of a bother because this is like a chunkier spun wool. So going through the needle took a little bit. And so I'm grabbing a length of that and just tying off the end. And then I am going to embroider the name on as well, similar to how I had done it with the embroidery floss. And so just going up, and I'm doing my stitches every 2 rows, and I think I like that look a little better, and with the gray it's a bit softer too. And there you have it, a nice little stocking that you can make out of some thrifted items that you have. And this one I decided to make for Millie, my brand new puppy here. And so I wonder what things Santa's going to bring her in her stocking. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a big thumbs up, and if you haven't done so already, please consider subscribing to my channel. And until next time, makers, let's get our Sew-Spiration on.